it was expected. It was mentioned in the past that we will have custom duty increase to put on the solar side. Industry did expect that they might extend it for an year, but this is happened now. This is a fact that from 1st April we'll have custom duty in place. This will certainly have a immediate some impact on the cost going up, since the custom will be around 40% in some cases, and this will lead to an increase in tariffs. One need to look at how this PLI scheme and when the manufacturing in India happen, at what cost and price, and able to make tariffs more competitive from a in a medium term basis. But my worry is that, as I've been saying, that we have been very aggressive in our bidding, so there is a limited cushion or a leeway, since we have a razor thin margin to afford any cost escalation in any aspect.
Great. So while people keep this running, I'll just quickly begin. It's such a big privilege and pleasure to connect with everyone, and our distinguished keynote speaker, who's handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience he brings in. Thank you also to our distinguished audience for joining us, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and are repeat visitors to our webinars. This is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online mode as well. And for those of you who are new with us today, Blue Circle is the world's first sector-specific networking app for business leaders that's built in India. We currently focus on 20 sector communities, such as e-mobility, infrastructure, energy, real estate, and many more. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Along with our weekly webinar series and our digital publication, you will be happy to know that we have recently launched the first version of the Blue Circle app for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for senior leaders, a space to have meaningful conversations, connect with over 10,000 plus like-minded leaders from India and across the globe, house high-quality curated content, and access business opportunities across these sectors. Those leaders among you who are interested, please just join us. I will share the link to the app in the chat section. I will soon be sending out invitations to our new guests post today's discussion. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce today's keynote speaker, Mr. Vivek Sharma, Senior Director, CRISIL. Mr. Vivek Sharma is an energy expert and has over 20 years of consulting experience in the entire energy spectrum, including in oil and gas sector, electricity distribution reforms, renewable energy, and new emerging sectors like storage, hydrogen, battery EVs, and other forms of energy sources as well. Currently, he is responsible for overall profit and loss of the infrastructure advisory, alongside handling multiple assignments and market outreach and relationships for advisory. He works closely with central and state governments on reforms, restructuring, regulations, policies, and programs in the energy sector, and has carried out several energy sector project appraisals. He also leads assignments in due diligence and commercial and transaction advisory, including evaluation of risks. Those are commercial, regulatory, market, and credit. Thank you. And for today's topic, Mr. Vivek Sharma will be discussing focus on infra to lead growth. Now I request Mr. Sharma to please begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Gautam, for the introduction. So today, guys, the focus of the discussion is on how the budget, especially, has given or laid down clear direction and focus towards infra build-up. And clearly, this budget directionally have not only once but many times did mention the importance of infra, the importance of clean energy, importance of achieving net zero emissions. I think just to put the perspective, even though we do expect budget to be one of the key milestone, but the fact is that there are things beyond the budget which the sector or the economy need to carry on doing it. So this is just one of the direction which provides through this budget, but there are beyond things which need to be done beyond the budget. So from that brief introduction, I'll just straight away come to some of the numbers in terms of how things are in the budget overall looks like. Clearly, the budget did has a focus of higher capex. Overall, the capex rise is almost 14%. And if I look at 9 infra ministries, which are the three infra ministries, capex, proposed capex will rise by around almost 11%. Now, the interesting bit of this capex driven budget is that, um, even though some of the numbers which you will see is there in the past also, in terms of, say last year we achieved 103% of budget target, and overall it was 5.8 lakh crore which was spent on capex. This year we're proposing 6.5. But the breakup of 5.8 is slightly more interesting, that we are saying in this budget that from internal and budgetary resources, the allocation will be lower than the gross budget support, which means off budget thing which used to happen. This time they are reducing that and calling that out and putting it into the budget. Clearly, 9 ministries, there is a heavy allocation on the road side, which I will talk about it. There is an increase bit of allocation in other sectors also. I will just go to that slide before. So this is the overall brief snapshot in terms of how the allocations has been made this year in the budget. Clearly, you would see that each of the sector has some degree of increase in the budget. Railways from 2.1 to 2.4. Power by and large has remained same. In urban infra, interestingly, they have spoken multiple times that they will set up a committee which will oversee the urban planning and ensure that some degree of green investments happen in that, and they have increased the allocation there. RE, as I will understand that beside the PLI scheme which we'll discuss, which especially focus on the solar manufacturing, the allocation there also have increased. Water resources, Jal Shakti mission again was called out that they will go in an aggressive manner. So there also the allocations have increased. Road, interestingly, even though the target wise looks very higher, but the thing here is that on the budget allocation side it is 1.9, and highway also remains the same. So they have tried to address some of the off balance funding which used to happen through the budget this time itself. Rest I think is the minors one, but if you look at specific in each infra sector, and then I can address some of the points specifically on each of the sector. The states in the power side, the states have been allowed to have a fiscal deficit of 4%, of which 0.5 will be tied up to the sector reform, which I think is a good encouraging thing to do. That if you are able to do reform which is under UDAY 2, then this particular fiscal deficit space will be given. That's the limited discussion on the distribution side. Not beyond has been anything discussed on the budget, even though the UDAY 2 is rolled out, and there were a lot of industry people were expecting that some announcement will be made around the dues which the DISCOM has, which has not happened and which remains a challenge. I'll talk about this in the next slide. But besides on the distribution side, on the convention generation side, again the focus on the clean energy side, that they have said that 5 to 7% biomass pellets will be co-fired with thermal generation overall to address the CO savings which can potentially happen. There is also an angle and there is a debate around it that this will lead to some degree of local employment and also address some of the biomass issue. But they, at the same time, for IPPs, they have to really gear up, or they have to change themselves to ensure this particular aspect is addressed. Also from the fact that they have to procure biomass and create entire logistic system around it. Encouraging one from a clean energy perspective, but things to do both on the industry side and on ground, the policy side need some actions further. As I mentioned, the big call out in the budget was clearly the PLI scheme for solar manufacturing, and this certainly need to be looked at with the shadow of that. We have introduced from 1st April custom duty on the solar modules. Now, which will certainly increase the cost or the tariff for a short-term basis. But with the PLI scheme, hopefully there will be a domestic impetus or domestic make in India will happen. That's the thought process why this was clearly called out by the government that they will put an additional allocation of 19,500 crore under the end-to-end solar manufacturing. Green bonds, again important. I put it in a renewable, but my sense is this could be used beyond that because it says that, and there again, a lot of work need to be done. There's just an announcement. How part, who will be the entities which will be involved here, whether it will require some degree of credit enhancement, it'll require government guarantees. All those things need to be worked out. Besides the fact that what will be the kitty or the amount the government is targeting through this bonds. My sense is if the bonds on the green side, once we are able to do government, it could be a good thing to be replicated in future also, and cannot only be limited for in the RE space, but all green technology option, including hydrogen or storage, or for that matter, even in urban housing or wastewater management. It could be many of the where we are thinking of reducing the overall emissions. Roadside always have been, I would say, one of the well done ministries in the terms of the output and the results on ground. It's always gets a pat on the back in terms of overachieving the targets, or for that matter, also building on a daily basis. The average road is increasing as every year we see it. So they are saying that they will expand to further 25,000 kilometer this year, even though it could some could start as towards the end of the year, and some could start in the beginning of the year. So on the average, one need to look at what will be the increase they are proposing. But certainly it's an ambitious target, and clearly the thought is that they will put money around it. And one clear call out on the roadside, highway side is this do have a cascading impact on the economy. Benefit in terms of local employment generation, local involvement, the rubbing of sectors like steel, cement, and other thing which clearly gets an impetus through the higher allocation and higher road build up. So that was, I think, the thought behind the government also, that this is something they can touch on employment and other sectors through this higher push for the better roads in India. And they have then packaged this with Gati thing, where all the other contours to which is required to facilitate this will be addressed through better land allocation, or what all approvals are required. Everything will go in parallel. So Gati Shakti is actually an umbrella thought behind moving on infrastructure faster by doing things in parallel. Similarly, on the Gati Shakti mission also, they have talked about that they will have more cargo terminals, strengthening multimodal logistic on the port side, which may help to shift to rail and railway from current dependence on the road network side. So, and on the railway side also, they have said that they will try to put PM Shakti, Gati Shakti cargo terminals for multimodal logistic facilities to be developed during the next 3 years. So these are like ambitious targets where basically it is talking about Gati Shakti under the umbrella where all three logistic the sectors related to logistics are addressed, whether it is road, highway, for that matter, ports or railway. All this will come under one umbrella so that the movement of goods are faster and more efficient, and in the process also leads to multiplier effect on the economy. Urban side allocation has bit, as I said, increased now on a Jal Jeevan mission also. The water for all, I think, is the second ambition target after achieving 24/7. This do require a lot degree of money and lot degree of state support to actually implement. It cannot be left by the center mayor allocation. There is, I think, the state need to come on board to actually have this investment, and then not only have the connection, but also then later on provide a drinkable potable water. So it's a big mission. I think it'll go long. Look at that. Housing has been an emphasis both in the urban and the rural side with the increased allocation. As I said, there was good to hear the clean tech and governance solution even for the urban development. And there, of course, the EV I have not touched on. But certainly we all will be waiting for the battery swapping policy, which the government want to announce. So they are trying to overcome the challenges with regard to charging infra by actually looking at battery, a portable battery, as an alternate to the charging infra. So that I think is on the urban side story. But if I have to just leave this discussion and maybe we can go to question answers, as I said, that budget is just one one sign post to look at, but there are the activities need to go on beyond the budget, and this is always important to look at things beyond the budget. So for example, as I said, in the power sector, clearly, whether it is IPPs generators or the convention generators, they were expecting some um, some call out or some announcement around the huge counterparty risk they're facing from distribution companies. And as we speak, there is almost over 1 lakh crore of dues are there for just for IPPs. If I have to include the vendors and suppliers, there's a far higher receivables pending with discoms. So discom health remains a concern. Result oriented ODE 2 is therefore critical in terms of how it gets implemented. I have been saying this is an improved version than the Uday one in terms of focus on the smart metering side and other aspects on the monitoring side. But I still believe the end game here also need to be very clearly articulated. If discoms are still not able to turn around after the second round of this another round of allocation and support, I think there's no other choice but to look at PPP options and privatization for these discoms. Otherwise, this have a cascading impact, as I said, on generators, whether it is even renewable sector. IPPs are feeling the pinch, including the fact that some of the states have wanted to renegotiate the PPAs for solar or for that matter wind. We have example of Andhra, then most recently Punjab. So all those things are happening because there is an undercurrent issue of power distribution entities, and we are still talking of giving more subsidy in the to consumers. We're talking of free electricity, free units of electricity. All those things I think need to be addressed very transparently and in a focused manner for helping the entire value chain, which has private sector involvement in this. On the RE side, as I said, that it was expected, it was mentioned in the past that we will have custom duty increase to put on the solar side. Industry did expect that they might extend it for an year, but this has happened now. This is a fact that from 1st April we'll have custom duty in place. This will certainly have a immediate some impact on the cost going up, since the customer will be around 40% in some cases. And this will lead to an increase in tariffs. One need to look at how this PLI scheme and when the manufacturing in India happen, at what cost and price, and able to make tariffs more competitive from a in a medium term basis. But my worry is that, as I've been saying, that we have been very aggressive in our bidding, so there is a limited cushion or a leeway since we have a razor thin margin to afford any cost escalation in any aspect. Other thing, I think, even though there have been a lot of point PLI scheme announced, there is a thrust on putting up more RE capacities. The on ground, I think on the policy side, there's a lot of good work has been done. But how we continuously assure that it get integrated with the grid will be important signpost to look at. Otherwise, acceptability of wind, solar, and all has its limitation, which you're already seeing it. And it's good to see some hybrid tenders also. But how we continuously look at the innovation around that, including making storage as streamlined option along with RE, will be critical to look at. Standardization of battery, even the policy we will wait, but standardization will be critical. We have been saying there is some degree of certification will also be required for the batteries, because on ground the warranties or the guarantees around battery is limited, and which impacts the cost of lending also, because there is a perceived risk about the battery till the technology is proven. We need some standardization and certification around it, so that I'm expecting this may to some extent get addressed in the policy which the government will come out as they announced in the budget. On the road side, on the EPC side, there are a number of players, and you have seen a lot of aggressive bidding there. So that remains one area of concern in terms of actual on-ground implementation and some challenges. Whereas if you look at the HAM model, hybrid annuity model, there the competition is stiff, and the entry is stiff. The competition is not stiff, the entry is stiff, and therefore there are certain operation challenges which investor reads in that, in the sense that they have to be there for 10 years out of 3 years moratorium and 7-year operation. So they have to operate it under this model. There you will see the number of players little less, and they are also scouting for more people to actually execute and then be part of the operation for the entire life. Port, overall, there is still remains some degree of underutilization of capacity. Largely, the cargo need to come more. Right now, it is 60% utilized. I think that need to address along with other option, even though we are thinking of putting as a Gati Shakti, how that pans out and helps it to increase the cargo will be critical for overall port viability and new addition of the ports. Railway, we had a very limited success on PPP. There were few tenders were called out for railway redevelopment, but it was not a success. I've not been saying for this, but all sectors we need to revive the PPP, public-private partnership, and there is a need to do a version 2 of it, which addresses very clearly the potential risk and the return matrix, and the contract need to be accordingly made very sacrosanct, including the fact that I think which is announced in the budget is the arbitration, how that will be addressed, and all those other concerns will be addressed. On the urban side, there always have been the concern is the resource mobilization and revenue augmentation, because municipals are suffering with that. And beside the fact that their capacity building need to be improved, which is very good part in the budget, they have announced that a lot of money will go in capacity building and putting up urban planners and build their capacity, so that ground level urban local bodies are strengthened, so that the urban issues is addressed well. And overall, I think the devolution of transfer need to be more clearer and sharper. So a lot of financing and public finance issues are there, which need to be dealt from the urban side, so that urban cities, as we call it, develops in the right fashion. So I'll leave it here, Gautam, and happy to take up questions around it.
Surely. So I'll just begin with the questions which we've already received. This is from Mr. Anil Bahl. He's the head manufacturing Zico India. He's asking, what are the indirect benefits in the budget visible to the middle class and common man? People only seem to look at IT reductions, SOPs, and freebies as benefits.
Yeah, that's, I think, an interesting question. I'm not that expert in it to answer it, but I can say it, from there is a fair degree of undercurrent in your question that, for a common man or a consumer, it is not only the taxation which is something which they should look at, but the fact that how or overall the economy can be made robust is need to be looked at. So clearly there was a debate around the budget should have more money in hand of the consumers by way of, say, subsidy, or by giving tax reduction, or other form, or the budget which is more capex driven. So clearly this budget is capex driven growth, they're calling it out. And the reason why the capex driven growth is important, one, it is slightly more sustainable, it leads to more employment. As I said, road, for example, is clear example where the local employment and other sectors get multiplier effect. So capex driven has a multiplier effect, leads to better employment and sustainable economy one can look at. Then also, if you see from the overall side, even though not directly in the hands of consumer, but all this PLI scheme or Make in India, some impact which should be there, you will see over the period of time on the cost or tariff which consumers pay. Classic example is also on the renewable side, because there was initial allocation made, and now you're seeing a very lower tariff which consumers are paying. Similarly, on the PLI scheme to start with, maybe in 2-3 years down the line, you will not need that scheme, but you will see a good manufacturing, competitive manufacturing in India, which for a common man indirectly will get benefited out of it.
True. Thank you. So I will now move on to the next question, which is a 4-part question. It is, so I'll start with the first one. How will India manage its borrowings vis-a-vis the high fiscal deficit and increase spending on infra? Second is, can India get into a debt trap? Third is, how are the geopolitical issues of Pakistan, China, Afghanistan, Bangladesh impacting the infra push? And lastly, how will the Make in India defense sector impact other sectors? This will propel a B2G sector, but can corruption be controlled?
It's quite an interesting question, a long one. Of course, I'm not a geopolitical expert, so I will refrain from answering that question, how other countries are impacting the infra push. But I would say largely within India, I think I have, if you see in the last year, spend which has happened on the capex side, we have exceeded that. In fact, we have roadside also, we have done well in spite of what's happening around the world. I don't think we are on a debt trap side. I think we have been prudent in terms of the fiscal deficit, even though it has increased in last 2 years. But that was specifically called out, and it's good that this off budget money which used to come is now part of the budget. So to the extent, I don't think so in a debt trap. But yes, something which we need to watch out is that this year they have still reduced the disinvestment target, and they think that they might exceed those targets. They put by say LIC IPOs on the cards. Then you have also the asset monetization pipeline which they are going to roll out. So they are slightly more ambitious there to get money out of that. So I would say there's not significant impact this year happening around anything which will lead to that trap. It's more or less the same. The focus definitely government focus will be on the asset monetization, and disinvestment, maybe the targets even though are lower. As we speak, I think after the budget that you have seen LIC announcements happening. BPCL is also something in waiting. And then there is a strong pipeline on asset monetization. How and when it happens along with line ministry is something which will help to augment the revenue for the government. Even on the tax collection side, the view, I'm not an expert, but the view is that there is a bit of conservative number on GST collection, which has been said. It could be a little more depending on how the economy and how the other factors like crude and other things pan out.
True. Thank you. So I'll move on to the next question, which is now in the Q&A section. The first question, which you've already partly covered from Mr. Anil Bail's question, but Mr. Soman Arora is asking more on the rural economy side. If you would like to just add around that. The question is, the statement and the question is, rural economy has been badly affected due to COVID and demand for jobs is growing. How much of the capex will be allocated for the rural part of the country?
So I don't have a number-wise answer, Suman, but I can tell you the roads will cross the rural areas. It's not. It will limit the capex will limit it to the urban areas because one of the clearly higher allocation is on this side always remains, and this trespasses to all of the segments. And to me, the other impact which will happen that there is a concern around the shortage of labor during the COVID period. And we all hope and pray that we don't have any more, especially like the second wave COVID, and we have a stable economy to look at. I think the rural economy will in fact bounce back with the higher demand for labor. even whether it is rural or urban areas or wherever it is. That's a concern, in fact, already coming up. So to me, it looks like the employment will improve in rural areas because of better economy or more allocation towards the capex side of it.
Sure. Okay. So Rakesh Malik has asked, what is the allocation on automating or improving the ports, which is very much needed to decrease logistics cost?
So I am not sure, Rakesh, this need to be mentioned in the budget, but there is a clear view that they are relooking at the way the ports are looked at from a logistic perspective. That's why they are putting under the umbrella of Gati Shakti. And I'm sure some degree of address will be also on the automating the port side. I think the entire Gati Shakti mission do accept the fact that entire thing has to be driven by the more tech and more advanced technology. So your logistic merely not only for port but all for road, railway, port, Gati Shakti, logistics system all need to be more technology driven and automated. That will be the part of the spend which they will do.
Okay, thank you. Aishwarya Anand asks, how will emphasis on infra demand? It's a very.
So I think I did mention that there's a theory. Two economists can have a different view and different way to approach it, but certainly infra leads to cascading. It has a cascading impact, and which helps to improve the overall economy and demand. For example, as I told earlier, that if you are say spending on building roads, so there are a lot of other industries which will come into play too, whether it is cement, steel, and the local rural employment. So the it is a demand booster. The one option is that you give money in the hand of people. The other is to actually drive the investment, do capex, build that infra, and then that leads to a demand propel by touching all those industries which are required. Similarly, if you are going to put money for say solar manufacturing, so there will be again the employment generation and other linked industry will grow, and it will lead to ultimately the demand booster, and it has a more multiplier effect than giving money in the hands of people. So it's a capex driven budget. As I said, it's an infra growth driven budget, and they are expecting that this will propel into higher demand.
Great. Yeah. So I know we've spent over time, but I'm just going to take one more question, and it's around the solar project side. The question is, does the BCD not put a discernible brake on the development of solar projects?
Yeah, so I agree. There was a considered there was a view by some of the players that it should be postponed of the same fear which you just articulated. But the fact is, the industry was aware that this is going to happen by 1st April 2020. It was told, last 2 years people were aware of it. Now the fact is that there is a clear thought of the government of India that eventually they want to move the manufacturing of solar as much as possible in India, and they have been focusing on this for last many years. There has been if I look at the industry people who are into the manufacturing, they are not becoming competitive, and they need some degree of help towards it. So certainly this, if you ask me, yes, in the initial phase will have some impact on the cost, will increase the cost, but it is allowed as the most of the PPA do allowed regulatory pass through of this. And in the bids which will come, there will be some reflection of that increase in those bids. That's, I would say, will be the limited impact. But as we move along more on a sustainable basis, I think the local manufacturing focus is clearly there, that we should not be completely dependent on the if I may call it Chinese modules or all that. there has to be some degree of energy security angle also around there. So I think we need to look at that. So from that perspective also, I think it was expected. It's nothing new. No. BCD is clearly a no pass-through as per government order. No, that's not right. Let me just clarify. BCD for the projects which are awarded last year to be executed this year, which will transit through the April 1st time, will will get a pass-through. Not as per the government order, the PPA allows that. If there is any change, they have to just go to the regulator and get that thing passed through. Yes, post April 1st, the new bids which will come, that should obviously they know now it is there, so they will bid based on that. So I think that addresses the point. So clearly, anything which is bid need to be procured in the year next. There it will be a pass through. They have to go to the regulator and prove that cost, higher cost, and that will be passed through.
Done. So there's another question. Can I address it or?
How to navigate energy transition considering that most aggressive costing as well H2 is currently costing, okay, hydrogen. Okay. Most aggressive costing H2 hydrogen is currently costing at 24 per MMBTU vis-a-vis 340 per MMBTU for natural gas. No, so that's true that right now the green hydrogen, if I've understood correctly, the right now the hydrogen certainly is expensive, and there's no reason not to believe it is not. This has been well documented and been called out. And gas is certainly less in terms of the pricing. But as I say, that the thought process of the is that they will, and we are waiting for the green hydrogen mission. And along with the fact that these big industries have already announced that they will heavily invest on it. With the economies and investment, we do expect some degree of reduction in the H2 cost as we move along. Not in the immediate terms, but yeah, in the medium terms, say 2050, 25, 26, you will start seeing the cost reduction, even though I think Reliance have announced by 2030, they will be at 1 kg per something. No, sir, the BCC order 6 months ago says no pass-through. No, so this is on the announcement of that. So I think there's no disconnect there anyway. For green H2 to be the cost effective solar will be 40 paisa per kW. I have not understood the question. For green hydrogen to be cost effective, solar will have to be 40 paisa per. Yes, that's true at this stage, no doubt. Even if in fact lesser than that. Yeah. So I think Gautam, it's we have taken most of the question, and let me know if happy to, we can close it.
Surely. Thank you so much. I think it was an insightful session and very privileged to hear you. And our guests and I have been hooked on till the very end and have taken home several nuggets. And thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining us and for staying till the end and always sharing excellent questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.